All right, welcome into the show. Happy Sunday. Hope everybody out there is having a great weekend. Coming up on today's Philadelphia Eagles. Now, a surprising player is climbing up the Eagles depth chart at the wide receiver position, and will he impact what the Eagles rotation looks like at that spot this year? It's all coming up. I'm Chase Sr. Thank you so much for hanging out here with me. And the other day, I began the show by asking, what year did you become an Eagles fan? We got some incredible responses going all the way back to the 1940s, 1950s, and of course, modern day. And today, same kind of question, but a little bit different. Who is your favorite Eagle of all time? For me, it's Brian Dawkins. For the last several years, I've had B-Dawk as the background to my iPhone, so drop that name for me, or names if you can't choose one, down in the comment section. Let's talk Johnny Wilson here on this Sunday edition of Eagles Now on this August 4th of 2024. As we know, sixth-round pick out of Florida State by Howie Roseman in Philadelphia. Really fascinating athlete at 6'6", 230 pounds. You marvel at that size at the wide receiver spot, and in fact, he is the tallest wide receiver currently in the NFL. And because of that height, some teams in the pre-draft process coming out of Florida State saw him as a tight end. But the Eagles have been and still are insistent on him being a wide receiver. Polarizing size when you think about all of the ways you can really use him inside this Eagles offense. Now, going back to high school, he grew up in Callabassas, California, four-star recruit. He started his collegiate career originally at Arizona State before finishing at Florida State, and the Seminoles last year had a terrific year up until Jordan Travis broke his ankle, unfortunately, taking the Seminoles out of the college football playoff contention. But for Wilson, a large target. He's really the equivalent of a basketball power forward at the wide receiver position. And huge arms. 84.5-inch wingspan, just freaky size. Last year, though, and this goes into his evaluation going into April's NFL draft, had 41 catches, 617 yards. Not bad production when he's the number 2 behind Keon Coleman, but only 2 touchdowns. And a lot of teams in the pre-draft process really knocked him because of that. So that brings us to his weaknesses here. Why did he only have 2 touchdowns at that size when he is just towering over so many collegiate defensive backs? You go back to the NFL Combine, his pro day, the aftermath of the Florida State season. A lot of draft evaluators thought that he played a lot smaller than his frame, than his size. How does he only come down with 2 touchdowns? Why can't he be a red zone threat with an 84.5-inch wingspan, long arms at 6'6", when he should be able to physically overpower his opponents? On top of that, sloppy route running, and he has been plagued by a lot of drops. 6'5" his last 3 years in college, and sometimes when it comes down to his route running and the nuances of it, he can lack concentration there, gets a little bit sloppy. In addition to that, his ball tracking has sometimes become a question. So far, though, during training camp and his rookie campaign for Philadelphia, Eagles coaching staff, Eagles players have been very impressed with what he's been able to do and what he's been able to bring to the field for the Eagles. And this is a great sign moving forward because there's something to build on here. And you always, as an organization, should be willing to take a flyer on a player with this type of size, stature, potential, and this ability at that draft slot late in the draft. Because if you hit on it, you get great value. If you don't, at the end of the day, it's a 6th-round pick, and oftentimes teams miss on those selections. The drops have continued at points in training camp, and that is a little bit of a concern. Sometimes you can't afford to put a player on the football field if you can't trust him, if you can't rely on him to make the consistent play. Not only are drops problematic, especially in big spots, they can lead to turnovers that can change the course and the outcome of a football game. But he has got some first-team reps, and that has been a huge surprise for everybody, really, so far throughout training camp. He wasn't expected to emerge this quickly to maybe get legitimate snaps as a rookie with this loaded Eagles offense that has a plethora of talent, from quarterback Jalen Hurts, who's been on fire throughout training camp, to Saquon Barkley, who looks as advertised, giving this Eagles team a great running dimension and another great weapon who can impact the game running it and catching it. You have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, maybe the best 1-2 punch at the wide receiver spot in the NFC, if not in the entire NFL. And I think that because teams are going to be loading the box and they're going to be focusing in on Saquon Barkley, they're going to be crashing toward the line of scrimmage. It's going to open up a lot of opportunities for Dallas Goedert to leak out into the flat, leak out into the seam, and just overall get more open and vacant looks because of all of the other talent on this team. And could Johnny Wilson be a part of that? With him climbing up the depth chart, even if he doesn't become wide receiver 3, he could give the Eagles a very diverse personnel package. And this is what I mean by that. You have Paris Campbell, who's been getting the majority of the wide receiver 3 snaps. John Ross has gotten some of those reps as well. So you have Paris Campbell and John Ross, who are speedsters. Paris Campbell, a 4-3 guy. John Ross, a 4-2 guy. And that was in the pre-draft process. Maybe they slowed up a little bit, but either way, they are vertical elements at that wide receiver spot, depending on which or if both make the team, who could take the top off of the defense. Then you look at Britton Covey. He's more of a possession-like slot receiver who's not going to get up and down the field vertically, but on third downs, he can be that security blanket, and against slower nickel and slot corners as well as linebackers, with his footwork, with his body control, with his body fakes, he can open up some windows for Jalen Hurts to move the chains, but he's not going to be an explosive player. And then you have Johnny Wilson, massive size, physicality. If you want to throw the jump ball to him and he can finally live up to that size and play up to that size, he can climb the ladder and get those contested opportunities and bring him down. And so you think about all of those players and what they're able to bring this Eagles offense. That is a diverse type of scheme, and you can use versatile schematic packages depending on what the defense is showing you, what scheme they are running, and you can really match up favorably depending on that team's personnel and their scheme, and you can counter that with all these types of different wide receivers. So this is pretty exciting stuff here as you look ahead to the 2024 season with a couple of weeks left for training camp, and then the Eagles get preseason football underway on Friday, and we'll see if this translates to the actual game for Johnny Wilson, which is obviously going to be paramount. Thought what Jalen Hurts said about Wilson was pretty impressive and pretty noteworthy. He said, we did one-on-ones the other day. There was Johnny Wilson. He shows up. He makes 2 big-time catches, and I tell him, quote, it's no surprise when you prepare for those situations. He put in the time during this offseason. We spent quality time together, and it shows. Quarterbacks and wide receivers doing these workouts during the summer, I know it pops off on social media. Some people might not think it's a big deal. It's a big deal. Look, when you're around your coworkers, you're around your friends and family members, you get to know each other better, and you work on those relationships, and then you start to respond to each other because you know that you have an instinctual feel for what that person's going to do, what they're going to say, and you just have that familiarity, right? The same can be said for athletes, especially for quarterbacks and wide receivers, when these routes and a quarterback's success with their wide receivers can depend on how that receiver comes out of their break, how they run their routes, where they like the football, and then the timing of all of that. Nick Sirianni on Johnny Wilson's usage, and this speaks to what I just talked about with what the Eagles are going to be able to do from a diverse schematic and personnel standpoint. Quote, he's big, physical, can bring an element of toughness and blocking to the group. As far as the number 3 wide receiver, it can be a lot of different things, but you need different types of skill sets, and I'm really excited about the skill sets that we have at the number 3 wide receiver spot. As am I, because it just gives Philadelphia a lot more options. If you enjoyed today's show, make sure you give me a real one down below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We are getting closer and closer to the return of Eagles football on the field. Watch party coming your way. Eagles-Ravens on Friday. You don't want to miss it. And, of course, coverage every single day, because that's the standard in the lead up to that and every day year-round.